The timeline is where we actually place our videos and everything that we want to edit. The timeline is located on the bottom. And in order to really show you these features, I'm going to go ahead and import a video into the clip bin. So I'll right click in the clip bin, go to import media, and then we'll go ahead and bring this sample intro file in. And then to get a video onto the timeline, there's two things that we can do. You can either right click the clip that you want to add and then go to add to timeline, or you can click and drag and actually place that clip on the timeline. Okay, either one works just the same. And you'll notice that as soon as you get a clip on the timeline, you get a preview of the clip in the preview window. So let's go ahead and look at the timeline itself, and then I'm going to show you some of the tools that are associated with the timeline right here. Notice that I have two separate tracks. Okay, I have a video track, and then I have an audio track. And the video track, as you might guess, contains the video for this file. And then the audio is actually separated from it. That way I can see the audio and the video separately, and I can manipulate the audio and I can manipulate the video. All the way over here on the left is a little lock. And what this will do is lock and unlock the track. So if we click it, then the track is locked. That simply means that we can't edit it. We can't do anything to it. And then if we click it again and unlock it, now it's editable. That's something that you'll understand a lot more later on when we're dealing with multiple tracks, when we have several tracks of video at the same time. The green triangle that you see here, this is the playhead, and that lets us see exactly what is playing right now. If I click over here in this area, then you'll see the playhead move, okay, and then my preview also gets updated. Okay, so we move around, and that's actually moving the playhead. At the top right here, we have some numbers, and these indicate times. And also, if we hover over this area, you'll notice that that little tooltip right there shows us exact times. That's something that can come in handy when you have to have something occur at a certain amount of time in your video. And this is the basics of this part of the timeline. And now let's look at some of the tools that pertain to the timeline. The first one over here on the left is a zoom in tool, and pay particular attention to this area right here. You're going to see also, notice that I'm looking at about 1 minute and 10 seconds worth of video. Okay, this is the length that I've got here. It's up to about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So if I zoom in, every time I click this, I'm zooming in closer and closer to the file, and not only is this section getting longer, but notice that now I'm only over to about 24 seconds. Okay, so I'm zooming in closer and closer, and that means that I'm not going to be able to see quite as much of the video at any one time, but I'll be able to see more details. You can tell I can see a lot more detail in the audio here. I can also, my movements, my motions, when I move the playhead, I'm going to be able to more precisely click a specific time. And then if we want to zoom back out, we use the very next button, which is zoom out. Okay, so every time we click this one, we zoom out. Every time we click this one, we zoom in. We have two views for this timeline area. This is the timeline view that we're looking at right now. There's also the storyboard view. Let's go ahead and click Show Storyboard. And this view basically shows us a clip at a time. If we happen to have, say, 5 or 6 videos back to back, then each one of them would take up one of these squares, and then these little arrow sections right here. Those would be transitions, which you'll learn about later on. So we want to go back to the timeline view. We'll click Show Timeline. And then I've got just a couple of more things that I want to show you before we move on. One of them is adjusting the amount of space that the timeline is taking up. Right now, my monitor, so that we remain as compatible as possible, I'm recording at 800 by 600. That's the resolution of my monitor. That honestly makes things a little bit tight. It makes it a little hard to work with everything that we can have going on here at one time. But if you want to adjust this so that it takes up more space, notice that you can hover right here. You get your double arrow, and click and drag, and you can resize. Okay, so it just kind of depends on exactly what you're working on, how big you might want this area. And the last thing that I want to show you has to do with the size here as well, and that's the tracks. Here's our option for tracks. And if we click on this, you'll notice that I've got several different kinds of tracks. Right now, the only one that's turned on is the audio 1 track. Now, there is another track that's turned on, and that's the video track, but that track can't be turned off, so it doesn't show up in this list. But now the audio 1 track has a check mark by it, and that's why it's showing up. If I wanted to turn that off, I could just click it again, and that turns it off. Okay, and any of these other tracks, let's turn it back on. Any of these other tracks behave the same way. Let's look at the audio 2 track. And we'll also turn on the picture-in-picture track. Okay, and you can see that this is why a higher resolution is recommended, because as we start to get more tracks and our project gets a little more complicated, we're going to run out of room and it's going to be real hard to work. You can imagine if I had 10 or 12 clips in my clip bin here and I get a very, very small preview. So you want a lot of room if at all possible, because if we squeeze this down, it can get a little bit difficult to work with that many tracks. Okay, let's go ahead and turn these off again. And that's the very basic functionality of the timeline. These other options that you see here on the toolbar are things that we're going to explore when we actually use them throughout the training.